39 days down, and the election marathon has become a sprint to the finish line. Political parties are making the most of the final 20 or so hours before polling stations open. What do they need to accomplish today, and what should voters expect? Let's hear from the Sunday edition of the Power Panel one final time. In Ottawa, Rob Silver is a longtime political strategist and commentator, and as we always disclose, spouse of Katie Telford, senior advisor on the Liberal campaign. And Kathleen Monk is next to him. She's with Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Here with me in Toronto, former Director of Communications to Stephen Harper and the 2018 campaign manager for the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, Corey Teneycke, along with CBC's polls analyst, Eric Grenier. Hi, everybody.
Morning.
Thanks
Hello.
for interrupting your weekend one final time. I appreciate it. Eric, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll get everybody in to get their takes on the strategies. But can you just sort of lay out very quickly where the latest where things stand?
Well, it's still a really close race between the Liberals and the Conservatives, and the New Democrats have had some momentum going into this last few days of the campaign. So it is still really tight. I think that Liberals are probably in a better position to win more seats just with how things are breaking down. But when it is this close, it doesn't require a lot of change to suddenly turn things upside down. So certainly, this is the closest election we've seen in quite some time, and so we'll have to wait and see what the results will be tomorrow.
Corey, given how close it is, what is the conventional wisdom behind the last 24 hours of a campaign? Does it matter what you're saying, how you're saying it, and where you're saying it, and to what degree?
Yeah, more than ever before it does, because I think one of the trends that's been growing over the last number of elections, not just here but many other places as well, is that as much as a quarter of the electorate really nailing down their decision in the last couple days of the race. It's not that people haven't been leaning one way or another, but still people who are making up their mind at the very last minute. And so I think that the final couple of days are really important to drive your ballot question. What is the election about? And trying to have that front of mind for voters as they go into the polls.
So, Kathleen, what are the implications then, based on what Corey said, for what you expect to hear over the day today, probably 3,000 times?
Yeah, I think there's three things. We boil down to three things in three words for most of the parties, and that's obviously the message, their machine, the party machine and the party apparatus at this point, and then mobilization momentum, that kind of being a combined three. I think that you've seen the messages of all three parties kind of tighten in the last few days, and certainly getting a bit crisper. The machines are being mobilized. There are people who've been working for the past 40 days on just focusing on E-Day, which is tomorrow. So looking at the ground game and how they're going to pull those voters. We know we had great advanced turnout, but there was still getting all those ones and twos into the ballot box on Monday. And in terms of mobilization, part of that is showing momentum and showing kind of some mobilization and excitement. And so that's why you see the parties in these last frenetic kind of 48 to 24 hours having these larger momentum rallies, these kind of whistle stops. You'll see people bussing through provinces really quickly and making side of the highway stops. Lots of what we call in the Burma shave, which is when you see lots of people standing on the street kind of holding signs and waving, because you want to get that excitement, because turnout in this election is going to be really important.
Rob, do you agree with the assessment that there are a big chunk of voters who can still be swayed?
For sure, and there is in every election, and there's a macro and a micro going on right now. So I agree with obviously Kathleen and Corey in terms of what the parties are trying to do. The other big thing is don't screw up. And what you really don't want is a mistake, a big mistake that changes things for the negative. But all of them are trying to drive a ballot question. So it's frustrating for reporters. We've heard the same speech now 42 times. There's no new news. There's a reason why that's the case. If you don't have your ballot question pretty clear that you're trying to drive at this point, you probably haven't run a great campaign. But then there's also the micro. So Eric talks about how close he perceives the election to be. What I can say is there are a lot of ridings that are really close, and the parties know the ridings that they think they're up by 2 points, down by 2 points, that can really make the difference between winning or losing, minority or majority. And those are the ridings where if you see a leader go, they think that, us stopping in riding X, doing an event in riding X could make the difference between losing a riding by 2 points or winning riding by 2 points. The danger, obviously, is when you try to get 500, 700 people out, they're not at the doors. So it's a trade-off when you decide we're sending the leader into this riding that we know is really close on the last Saturday, the last Sunday of the election. It can make a difference. We certainly saw in 2015 in the Liberal campaign, a lot of the places, I think there was only one place that the Prime Minister stopped in on the last couple of days. Don't quote me on that, and don't call me fake news if I'm off by a number or two. Almost every riding he went to was a swingy type of riding. You can do it for all kinds of other reasons, Corey. And it did make a difference. But it does take a lot of resources getting those people out. So it's a trade-off between the ground and trying to push it over the top in terms of having that big event.
Right. I like how Rob calls it, Eric, a swingy riding. They're all in BC today. And I know we're going to talk a bit more about what the numbers show there a little bit later on in the show. But as far as swingy ridings go, there are a whole bunch in this election.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, if we, extend that to as much as we can, we're maybe a third of the ridings are technically going to be, not technically, but they're going to be very close. And it's interesting what Rob says about how sending the leader to push you over the edge on some of those ridings. In 2015, the Liberals were able to keep adding ridings. That, maybe this one now we can win, maybe this one now we can win. But in this election, there's not that kind of momentum going, so it might be a lot more difficult to say, we have this momentum, let's send the leader here and then push us over the edge in this riding, because it does seem like everybody's just stalling at the end of this weekend. So that's the extra challenge. The visit.
Sorry,
yeah, go for it, Rob.
Now I am spitting for the Liberals. They were in Milton yesterday. They were in Brantford. Those are ridings the Liberals haven't won in 15 years. So I get why, from a public perception, there's no momentum. Nothing is moving. I'm not sure as of tomorrow at 11 o'clock that might be the analysis. We'll see.
Yeah, but that would be like a riding where it's going to be close, so sending him there might get the extra votes out. Whereas in the last time, it was about kind of building on the momentum that was building up by the end of the campaign.
Corey, let me get your take on how close some of the ridings are, and particularly in BC, because that is where, as I mentioned, every single leader is today. Why are they all there today?
Because of the vote splits are such a factor in British Columbia, especially the Lower Mainland. It's always such an interesting place. All through the 90s, you can win ridings in the low 30s there. So it's unique that way, and I think particularly in this race, because it's not just a three-way vote split as we've seen in a lot of past Canadian federal elections. And now we have the Green Party in British Columbia doing much better than they traditionally have, and maintaining their numbers much later than they have in the past too. So it's going to be very interesting vote splits. I think people in BC might find this a more rewarding election because there's often complaints there. It isn't decided by the time it comes to British Columbia.
Yeah. Kathleen, what do you think the nature of the potential four-way splits and so many? What do you think the implications are for some of the major parties?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I agree with Corey's analysis that it's because of the four ways that splits, particularly on the island, that can make it a really interesting place. But also new Canadians and how those ridings shape up in Surrey and in part of the Greater Vancouver area, which is an urban riding but very diverse. So all the parties are there, and BC is just interesting, right? Because the interior has a different flavor to it, and then there's the north. So and there's lots of issues that are held strongly in BC, and so a lot of the parties have been trying to obviously profile those issues strongly in their platforms. I think that's why you're seeing, for instance, Jagmeet Singh not holding one but two large rallies in the province the last couple of days, both in Victoria and in Vancouver, and he's going to be spending the rest of the time there. I don't know if that can be said for the other leaders. I'm not privy to the Liberals or the Conservatives tour schedules for the final 24, but I would imagine that Jagmeet is the only leader that stays fully in the BC region for the next till the end of E-Day.
Well, he's also there because his riding is.
That's right, his riding's there
for election night as well. Rob, how close do you anticipate BC will be? How significant do you think it is for particularly the Liberals and the Conservatives? And has it changed from from the start of this campaign at all in its significance?
Yeah, I mean, it's as neither the NDP nor the Greens fell off. So there was always a scenario, and I don't want to come across as arrogant. There was always a scenario that their vote just dissipated. And if we think back to the start of September, that was a real possibility. It hasn't. And if anything, especially with the NDP, it's gone the opposite way. But I think the reason why you're going to see Mr. Scheer, Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Singh, and obviously Ms. May there is, again, there's the macro and the micro. So there's individual ridings. Our numbers say this is within 3 points of 4 different parties, so we're going to go there to try to help that riding. But also there's the potential for a macro swing within the province. There's been volatility in British Columbia because of the various dynamics at play. So if your presence there for the last 24 hours could swing province-wide things by 2 points, that can swing even ridings you're not in. 4 or 5 ridings suddenly are in your column that may not have been in your column at the beginning of the weekend. So there's a lot at stake in British Columbia. And again, I agree with Corey. We may not know the result of the election in terms of what type of government we're going to have until BC results come in tomorrow night. So get a good night's sleep tonight.
I want to take a little bit of a look back now that we're at the, I can't believe it, the end of this campaign. Corey, I'll begin with you. I'm hoping that I can get each of our more partisan panelists, not Eric, we'll bring you in after, but to kind of reflect on what you think, what strategy or message from the Conservatives in your case worked, and what do you think didn't?
Yeah, well, I think you're seeing them drive their ballot question, as I think we're seeing all the leaders do, fairly effectively. As you know, we were joking off air that the answer to every question right now is your main ballot question, which is frustrating and not fun, I'm sure, for people wanting to hear answers to other things. So, like, I think they're doing an effective job of getting out the choice, which is, you know, if you're dissatisfied with this Liberal government and this Prime Minister, then they're, you know, the only other party that's going to form government is a Conservative Party, and so you should vote for them. I think there's been examples of all the parties stepping on their own message a little bit. I think the Conservatives would probably have not wanted to have the Warren Kinsella sort of distraction the last couple days, because it's an important time to have message clarity, and that was getting in the way of that. So I would say that's probably, if I were the Conservative campaign, the one part of the week that I would have rather not had.
Just quickly to update our viewers, that's basically the Andrew Scheer declined yesterday to answer whether or not, as reported first in the Globe and Mail, that his party had hired a firm led by Warren Kinsella to, quote, seek and destroy Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada. There was no clear answer from Mr. Scheer on that yesterday, but I take your point. Kathleen, if you were to identify what you think the NDP did well and what didn't work for them, what would you say?
Yeah, I thought we were going to go through all the parties, but if you just want me to focus on mine, I'm happy to. I would like you to focus because I have opinions on all of them, in case you're wondering.
I'm shocked to hear that, yeah.
In terms of the NDP, you know, for 15 years, I would argue, certainly my more active engagement in politics directly, not just covering, but in politics, working in politics, the New Democrats have suffered at the hands of a Liberal message around strategic voting since about, I would say, most dramatically in the 2004 election with Paul Martin, when he, dramatically went from coast to coast and kind of scooped up all those progressive voters. And we've been hurt by that message really in the last several electoral cycles. And I think what the NDP has done successfully in this election, and we've tried hard in previous, but I think what they really punched through in 2019 is that actually you don't have to vote out of fear. You actually can vote for what you believe in. You can actually vote for a vision of Canada that you want and the policies that you want. And I think that really has been kind of where that message clarity has come from, is just the effectiveness and the authenticity really that Jagmeet Singh has presented throughout this campaign, truly as a fearless campaigner and a courageous campaigner.
And what did they do wrong? You forgot that part.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what they did wrong, I think
Conveniently.
No. I'm happy to speak about that. You have to talk about the good and the bad in your party. And I think that really what they did wrong is the setup into this election campaign, right? We are going into the worst, like a really poorly funded election campaign. We don't have money to run ads. We couldn't, therefore, take advantage of the lift that we got out of the debate. So that's been something they've struggled. So not putting money in the bank and being prepared in advance going into the campaign. Thankfully, though, that really throughout these 40 days, he's pulled it out. And all the predictions that happened 40 to 45 days ago about, New Democrats not surviving even to party status out of this election will be proved untrue.
Rob, what do you think the Liberals did well and what did they do wrong?
I also have thoughts of the other parties that I thought we were going to talk about. Look, my full bias and conflict disclosed. It's not just the last 40 days. The last 8 months have had. There have been days that have been challenging for the Liberals, and I think what they've done very well from the top, the Prime Minister, through the whole campaign structure, is stay focused. The sky is not falling. Tomorrow is another day. We have a strategy. We have a plan that's working for Canadians, and this is a campaign plan that we think we can win another mandate from Canadians on. And a less mature campaign, and it's not me criticizing any of the other campaigns. There were lots of days it might have been tempting to take a different path, to get flustered, to get worried, to say the polls aren't moving as quickly or the ways that we hope. But they stayed pretty focused and stayed pretty disciplined to a campaign strategy that they had bought into, and I think that they're going to be rewarded for it tomorrow night.
And once again, you also forgot the part of what
are
your
we out
party
of time?
didn't do so well.
Actually, I don't want to.
Yeah, no, we are not. We are not. No.
I can volunteer that.
I'm sure others can jump in if you. Yeah, you guys would rather.
I think there were times when, look, they had a very detailed, thoughtful platform. They have a very positive economic record. Because of the way the campaign unfolded, I think there were days when it was challenging to get that message across. I don't think that.
I'm not sure that's something that they did wrong.
No, I think
Corey is contesting the notion that you characterize that as them doing something wrong.
I'm happy to jump in on Andrew Scheer's campaign as well. But yeah, no, I think
that's the job interview. You know, what's your worst quality? I just work too hard.
Yeah.
Eric, let me bring you into this because I'm wondering what you think about if you can help us sort of look at the trajectory of the campaign and whether or not, I know it's been close for so much of it, and then in the last week and a half we really saw the share, particularly for the Liberals and Conservatives, of the overall popular vote decrease. But have there been moments that have moved things at all, or that you would identify as changing at all the trajectory of the campaign?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think in Quebec the debate over Bill 21 was one of the it's what changed all the numbers there, because Blanchet, in the French language debates, he was effective at being able to position himself as the only one on stage who was in line with where Quebecers were on this particular issue. And so that helped him get to where he was, because before the first Théviat debate, the Bloc was doing okay, but not anywhere near the potential where they are now, where they could win. They could be the party that wins the most seats in Quebec if things go their way. And I think that in the English language debate, because of the way that the campaign has been largely about Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer going after each other, there was a lot of negativity around that. We've seen that Justin Trudeau's own personal ratings haven't really improved. They were bad going into the campaign, and they've stayed that way. And Andrew Scheer's have gotten just as bad. They're now as unpopular. It's very rare for the opposition leader to be as unpopular as someone with a record. And I think that Jagmeet Singh, because he was just able to be a normal person, had a good few likable moments in the debates that a lot of people just looked at and like, oh, look, I don't have to choose between two people who, I don't feel very good about. So I think that was a turning point for the New Democrats, and it got them to where they are now, which is more in their traditional level of support. But I think they might have needed something a bit more to get them back to, the Tom Mulcair, Jack Layton 2011, into the 2015 kind of era in terms of the NDP being seen as a viable alternative for government.
Corey, do you think there is a single ballot box question in this campaign, or is it different depending on who you're voting for?
I think it's different for everyone. But like this is an election campaign, just building on what Eric was talking about, where almost all of the parties are coming out losers. The BQ and the Greens are probably the only two parties that are really going to be able to say that they've ended this campaign in a better position. I think the reward that Rob's party is going to get on election night is at best a minority. So it's not good. And both the Conservatives and the Liberals have seen their popularity decrease over the course of the campaign. That's not good. And while there has been some momentum for Jagmeet Singh personally in terms of his approval, I think that's largely because nobody's attacked him. NDP leaders often benefit from that. Nobody points your guns at you. You don't take as much fire. You look better. But he's going to end up with NDP having fewer seats than they did going into this election. So that's hardly a victory. So, there are a lot of losers in this election in terms of what the outcome is. And that's why it's going to be very interesting to see what happens after the campaign's over.
I want to get final thoughts from both Kathleen and Rob. Kathleen?
Yeah, I mean, what Corey says is, in some sense, you have to look at what the metric is that you measure success by. Is it 2015? Is it dissolution? Is it, expectations at the beginning of the campaign? And I think that if you roll back just to expectations, which is the most favorable position to put in terms of when you give the analysis of my party, the expectations were really low. And so, yeah, we have exceeded that. But in terms of the metric of 2015 or a dissolution, the seats of dissolutions, Corey's completely right. Basically, all parties are probably going to take a wash except swept the block, really. I don't think that Ms. May has run a good campaign. I don't think that her party probably she'll keep the 2 seats she had, and so I'm not sure if we can really call this the breakthrough climate election for the Greens either.
Yeah, the only thing
Rob, final word to you.
I get everybody's point, and I don't necessarily disagree with the point. Former Ontario Premier Bill Davis had a quote saying the worst day in government is better than the best day in opposition. Yeah. If you get to call yourself Prime Minister at the end of the election, even if you've lost seats, even if you've lost votes, even if it's been a rough election, you get to call yourself Prime Minister at the end of it.
All right. Well, we will see tomorrow evening. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much to our power panel, Rob, Kathleen, and Corey. Thanks for interrupting your weekends 6 weeks in a row. It's been wonderful to have all of your insights during this campaign. Really appreciate it.